Talks Tasha, and we have a fabulous guest. Her name is Joyce Martilla. Hello, Joyce. Nice to have you on Talks Tasha. First question I'm going to give to you is, what is a cult?
Cults all give you a purpose. So there's this idea that we all want a purpose for being. We want to mean something. We want our life to have purpose. We want to be able to say, I did that, or I was a part of this, right? There's also, when you look at Maslow's hierarchy, right? We all want to belong. So after our basic needs are met, we want to belong, whether that's in a relationship or to something bigger. So cults all really zero in on that. There's a lot of different kinds of cults. People don't realize how many different kinds of cults there are. So there's cults that are based on or loosely based on religion. There's cults that are based on the way you eat. There are cults for running cults. There are meditation cults. So just about everything that you can think of. There's even cults they say they're going to do is help you get to your better self, right? So there's a range. When you're given that purpose and you're given that sense of belonging, then comes the, well, you have to sacrifice this. You have to give up this. But you're already brought in. You're already tied in. Now that's for people who join cults. For
Right.
people who are born and raised in cults, there's none of that. That's what you're raised with. You grow up believing that's your purpose. You grow up believing that you need to sacrifice yourself for the better good of everything else that's happening. You grow up believing that you need to be what you're told to be, who to be, how to talk, how to walk, how to dress, how to interact. And if you don't do what's required of you, you're shamed, you're humiliated, you are until you conform. Remember, while I was in public school, which I didn't continue that, but while I remember my teachers always would say, Joyce is a delightful child, but she does talk a little too much, right? So they loved having me. I was delightful. I got good grades, but I didn't talk too much, and I needed to learn how to be quiet during certain times, right? So, okay, that was just part of who I was. In the cult, I remember one specific time we were having dinner after our Sunday meeting, and all the kids were in the back table, and then all the adults were in the larger table. So there were probably 35, maybe 40 people there, and we were all in the back. And my mother was all the way at the end of that table, which we couldn't even hear what she was saying. And I remember whispering something to the girl sitting next to me. And my mother saw that I was talking while she was talking. So she said, what are you talking about? Do you really think that what you have to say is more important than what I have to say? So then she had me come up to the front, and she said, what you have to say is not more important. I don't care what you were saying. And then she told someone to go get her a piece of cardboard and a string. And she took the string and she attached it to the piece of cardboard, and she wrote on the cardboard, do not speak to me. I cannot speak to you. And I had to wear that around my neck for 2 weeks. I was not allowed to speak to anyone, and I was not allowed to be spoken to unless an adult was giving me directions of something I was supposed to do, like go clean the bathroom or whatever. And so what do you think that did to my natural inclination to talk? I got the message, you need to shut up.
What you was birthed into, what you was raised into, was it a sort of a religious aspect, like the cult you was part of, or what was it? What sort of,
Yes.
what was you birthed into?
So I would say that it was loosely based on the Bible. And what I mean by that is that my mother took the scriptures and interpreted them the way that she wanted to in order to get her message across. So she would read part of the scripture, but leave the next part out. So it said what she wanted it to say, which you see people do that all the time. They're constantly taking scripture and saying, oh, you can't do this because of, look, you're going against what your own scripture says. People do that all the time, but they never read the whole context of what the scripture was said. They never read the whole scripture. They just pick out the part that they want to use to say, see, you Christians are bad, right? And so what she did was she used it in a way to control and to use it to get her message across. She also self-identified as a prophet of God. So she said that she spoke directly to God. It's really hard to question someone when you believe from the time you're very small that your mother is a prophet and talks directly to God. So when she says God says something, who are you to say he didn't? You have to conform to this idea that is the cult leaders, my mother's idea. So she was not just my mother. She was the cult leader and she was a prophet.
You were submerged in all this, wasn't you? You was totally submerged in this whole thing going. Did you have siblings or father or head of the house? Okay.
I had there were 6 of us and they were all in the cult. They were my oldest brother, he was an adult. I had 2 sisters who were probably about 16 when it all kind of, maybe even younger than that when it started. More like 11 when the first woman came to live with us. And I was 1. And so then after that, it just, it grew. We all lived together, and then it grew until we had to move, until we got bigger places and more people. And so I was in some ways, I was a lot taken care of by my 2 older sisters who were 10 years older than me. And because my mother was too busy, getting the word from God and studying and, doing all the stuff that she was doing. So she still was in charge of me and she still had a big impact on my life, but she didn't take care of me day to day. There was always somebody else doing that.
The nurturing, she wasn't nurturing as a mother to you?
No, not at all.
You didn't get any of that at all? Okay.
Well,
okay.
I remember going to my mom and asking for a hug, like any kid would do. And she would give me a hug, and then she would say, okay, get off me. Quit hanging on me. Go. Leave me alone. Get off me. So what I realized as I was actually doing my own healing, and after I had my daughter, I realized that, I remember saying to myself, I will never reject my child if they ask for a hug. And this was before I kind of processed everything. I didn't know where it was coming from. I just had this very strong message that I would never do that. And I hadn't connected it to the rejection, that every time I asked my mother for a hug, I was rejected. I didn't really connect it at that time. I just knew inside me as a mom, I would never do that. You give your children what they need. And if they need a longer hug, you give them a longer hug. That was a way that I started figuring out that I could transform my own trauma. That was a trauma. Being rejected every time when I went to my mother for a hug, that was traumatizing because she hugged other people. So it made me feel like I wasn't good enough. When my kids got to be in their teens, that really hard time, right? I hate you. You're the worst mother in the world, that kind of thing. And I'd say, okay, well, go to your room, think about it, and I'll come in and I'll talk to you after you've had a time to pray, had a time to think about it. I'll come in and talk to you. So I'd let them have their breakdown. Then I'd go in, we'd talk about whatever the situation was. And then I'd say, okay, now come on, we're going to do a heart-to-heart hug. So a heart-to-heart hug is when we both hug each other and our hearts are touching, but it's not a heart-to-heart until both of our hearts are open to each other. And with that lean in thing, that's not really a hug. And I'd say, no, that's not a heart-to-heart. Come on, put your arms around me. I get the noodle arms barely, touching me. I'd say, no, that's not a heart-to-heart. And so then pretty soon you would feel the minute their heart opened, they would come in and now they're holding tight. And I would say to them, do you feel my love? And they'd say, yeah. Do you feel mine? And that was a heart-to-heart hug. And it became a strength to actually heal with my children when my children were broken, when they were upset, when they were distant, when they couldn't bridge that gap between us. I bridged it with the heart-to-heart hug. My trauma was transformed into my strength.
Did you leave home, or did you say to Mum, I'm going to get out of this, I don't like it here? How did you get out from your mother's house of this cult?
One, it wasn't easy. I was 24. I was married with 2 kids when I left. And when my husband and I first said that we wanted to leave, we were convinced to stay. So basically, my mother told my husband that if we left, that the blood of the children would be on his hands. And that if we left, we would have left our calling, and our calling from God. And we would no longer be favored of God. That when you leave, you become dead to them. So they don't contact you. They won't have a relationship with you. And for me, that meant leaving all my siblings, all my nieces and nephews, all my godchildren, my religion, and my culture. It was very scary leaving. And it took a desperation in me that made me have to leave.
So when you left, did you get to a place to forgive your mum, or you're going through the process of forgiving your mother, or it's just we leave it there and that's with your mother when it comes to your mother, or you haven't got there yet?
It took a long time. And for a long time, I was like, you know what? This is all bigger than me. And I'll leave the forgiven up to God. One, she never took responsibility for anything. I did see my mother one time before she died. I saw her about, maybe 8 years ago now. And I went up there actually to see my sister, who was still in the cult, and to see my mom. But really, it was more about saying, I'm okay. Right? And so she asked me, do you have some things that you want to talk to me about? Or do you have some unresolved issues? And I said, oh, yeah, I do. Right? She said, okay, come back tomorrow and we can talk. So I came back, and I was actually with my younger sister. She's actually my sister-in-law, but she was like my younger sister. And she came with me, and she said, is she going to be here the whole time? And I'm like, no, it's okay. She can go. But my older sister was there. And so she stayed there. And so I talked to my mom about some of the things that were upsetting. How do I forgive all the things she did to me? And I have not even addressed all of the things that she did to me. The things that I have said here at this point are very mild compared to some of the other things she did. So much of it was emotional and spiritual abuse, which you don't always see the scars, but there was some physical abuse. One question about forgiving my mother with someone who has trauma. When you touch on something that is really deep, they tend to know how to get right away from that, which is one of the reasons that therapists have difficulty with them, because they constantly just move on to something else. And because they get so involved in that, they never get back to it. So I'm going to get back to it. Yes, I did, but not to her face. She was already dead. And the process I went through was really more kind of about letting her hold on me go. It's not so much about forgiving the acts. It's about saying, I'm no longer going to let that hold on to me. I still feel that it's between her and her God to deal with whatever she did or didn't do, right? That there's a higher power for me that is going to deal with that. And she never did admit to any of the things that she did. When I had that conversation with her, she couldn't even say that she loved me. She said she no longer knew me. Therefore, how could she love me? And my sister was like, Mom, this is Joyce, your baby. Don't you love her? And she said, I don't know her. That I actually went through a process of saying, I need to let this go. I need to let whatever I'm holding on to around this forgiveness piece, I need to let it go, because it's still sitting in me and it's still causing me harm. And so I said, okay, I forgive her. I let it go. I know she's got her own answers that she has to answer to, but I'm not responsible for that. And I need to get rid of this. And, I had an actual visceral reaction when I did that. I got ill and my body released that trauma.
Wow.
And I didn't, I know about that. And I know that happens, but I wasn't expecting it. I mean, I wasn't expecting it was like instant. After I said that, it's just like, whoa, I got sick. And it was like, wow. And my body released it. Right. And afterwards it was like, I felt a little lighter about it. It doesn't take away all the things she did. It doesn't take away the trauma. It doesn't take away all of the experiences that I had. What it did was released the trauma that I was holding within me against her, because that was not helping me. But it's not the kind of forgiveness that people talk about where you go and you say, I forgive you for everything you did. That's not what I'm talking about. It's about just forgiving to be able to release it and let it go.
Joyce, this has been amazing. And thank you so much for coming on Talks Tasha. And I would love you to come up here again and tell me further on how you're getting on in the future. Is there anything else you would like to say? Or is there anything that you would like to tell somebody that is experiencing or going through a situation? What would you like to say to that person that's probably trapped, What would you like to say?
I would just say that no matter where you are in your process right now, that there is hope. And no matter what desperation you're feeling, no matter what effects of the trauma that you're feeling, that you can heal and you can transform your trauma.
Do you just speak on events and things like about this, or?
I don't have a charity or a foundation yet, something that I'm working on. But what I do have is I do help people who were born and raised in cults. I do coach them. I also have a group that should be starting soon for people who were born and raised in cults. I also have a Facebook group that if I talk to them, they can join, but I have to make sure that they are who they say they are, because I try to keep it safe. Yeah. And then I also am going to be launching a new course to actually teach therapists how to work with cult survivors, especially people who were born and raised in cults, because I have my master's in counseling and I have my PhD in psychology. So I know what they do not teach, and I know what they do teach, and I know they're lacking in this area. And it's not because they want to be, it's because they don't know about it. And they don't know that the way you do therapy with someone who is born and raised in a cult is different than what you do with just anybody else.
Yeah. But I was to say, if there's anybody out there who's watching this, you know, Joyce is a living testimony that you can come out from this, but it's not easy, like you're saying, because you've got to be real as well. We can say, I'll just leave or whatever, but it's not easy to just get up and just leave. It's a process to getting out if you are in a cult. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. And the other thing that's really hard about it is you don't have any finances. You don't have anybody on the outside world to connect to help you. So you're kind of on your own.
Isolated.
And so it's scary in so many ways. I didn't even
reach out to Joyce because that's what she's here for. So thank you all you lovely people for watching, and I'll see you on the next video on Talks Tasha. Bye-bye, everyone.